Now, for a decade, the poet Rowan McCabe has been travelling the UK, knocking on doors and reciting his work to strangers.
Well, he's now written a book about his travels. We'll speak to him in a moment, but first, let's see a little bit of the door-to-door poet in action.
I'm a door-to-door poet. I'm scruffy and hungover, but this could be worse, you know. I could be a Jehovah. I won't tell you that you're the devil. If you disagree, I won't talk about the afterlife. One's enough for me. I'm here to make poetry exciting, like bungee jumping, but less frightening. So I'm at your door to find the subjects that flow through your mind. Tell us about your life. Okay, maybe not the whole of it. I'll stick it in a poem or at least have a decent go at it. Maybe you heard a great story you'd love to hear in rhyme. Maybe your blood is boiling from a recent council fine. So don't slam the door, don't be nervous. The door-to-door poet is at your service.
Love it. Really love it. So, Rowan, this has been a project of yours for many years.
It has, yeah. I've been working on it for quite a long time, and I started off in my hometown in Newcastle, and then 2019 to 2020, I went all across England.
And right across the United Kingdom. But when you first started, I think a lot of your sort of close friends and family were like, whoa, you quit your job, this is a big risk.
Yeah, and it was. When I first started it, I wasn't really sure if it was going to work, to be honest with you. And I went out in my hometown and I sort of thought to myself, well, at the very least, it would be funny if it failed. You know, it would make for a funny story. And actually, the interesting thing was there was a lot more people who were interested than I assumed there was going to be. You know, the responses were really positive. And that's kind of what led us to want to take it further than that, you know.
Simple question, but why?
Well, I was thinking, very good question. I think, I was thinking about two things. I was thinking about the fact that the street I was living on at the time in Newcastle, I didn't know any of my neighbours. I was living in a flat on a row of terraced flats, and there was probably about 400 people around us. And I remember one day thinking, I've never spoke to any of them, never even said hello. And I don't think that's particularly unusual, is it? Like, I think a lot of us don't really speak to our neighbours these days, and I started thinking about how unusual that is. I speak to strangers in lots of other places. I speak to them on the bus, in the pub. So I was thinking about that. And I was also thinking about the fact that I'd been doing poetry for a while. The idea of doing it for a job was becoming a strong possibility. And I'm the first person in the McCabe family to go into a career in the arts. And I was thinking about what that means. You know, what does it mean to be a poet for a living? You know, it's never going to be a proper job, is it? You're never going to have to clock in and do a 9 to 5. You're never going to have a line manager standing above you with a pie chart or something like that. But what if you did? You know, what if you had to clock in 9 to 5 and do it like a quote-unquote proper job? And I started wondering, you know, what if you had to go door-to-door, like a door-to-door salesman? And from there, the idea just sort of popped into my head, really.
So when you're going door-to-door, give me a best experience, worst experience, because you don't know who's going to be behind those front doors, do you, when you're knocking on those doors?
Yeah, of course, yeah. And in terms of best experience, it's quite hard to answer that question, because when I knocked on the door, I only ever asked one question. Right. So I knocked on the door, I told the person that I was doing an art project, asked them if they had 1 minute and 10 seconds to spare, and if they said yes.
And that was your introductory poem?
Yeah, and if they said yes, I did a poem for them. Yeah, and the poem basically asked them, what is important to you? That was the only question I ever asked people. So in terms of the best reaction to that, it's hard to answer, because when you ask a question like what is important to you, people brought all kinds of different answers, right. You know, all kinds of different responses. I met a surfing enthusiast in Newcastle called Kyle. I met a professional bell ringer in Limerick and Ireland. But I think because the question is so open as well, you got all kinds of different responses, and some of them were silly and daft, and some of them were really harrowing. You know, people opened up about some really personal things that happened to them. So I met a woman in Boston, in Lincolnshire, called Margaret, whose daughter was tragically murdered, and that's what she asked for a poem about. Yeah. So it's hard to answer, like, best experience, because I think in the book, you know, there's so many varied responses, and it's really difficult to say, like, this one is the best, you know?
And actually, it's the kind of spread of stories that you get that give a bit of a snapshot of this country and where it is, and people's responses to poetry as well. You don't just make the poem up on the spot. You go away, you give it some thought, and then you go back and perform it 2 weeks later. What kind of response do you get when you do that?
Well, yeah, positive, I'd say. You know, it's always difficult to talk about from my point of view because you don't want to say, oh, yes, they loved them. You know, they thought the poems were fantastic. It's hard to say it without sounding like you're kind of blowing your own trumpet, really. But I had some lovely moments of connection with people. And I remember meeting a man called Alan in Bensham, just outside of Gateshead, and he answered the door and he said, you know, I'm not really that interested in poetry, to be honest with you, but you can come in and I'll have a chat with you, you know. And I got chatting to him, and he told us the story of his life. And I came back with a poem about speaking out about racism in public that Alan had seen occurring, you know. And I read him the poem, and he just seemed really, really pleasantly surprised. He said, I never would have assumed I was going to enjoy that. I think it's great. And on the back of that, he started going to regular poetry nights around the northeast,
Nice.
and he met up with some of my friends who organise events and things like that. And there was a lovely kind of ripple effect, you know.
You've used the word connection a couple of times. It strikes me a lot of this is, you know, take the poetry aside, this is just about the power of, you know, people, you know, and connections, and maybe finding out people's stories and how we're all linked in this weird world together with stories. I
think that's exactly it, yeah. And the poems in the book, I like to look at them as the glue. They kind of hold the book together. But really at the heart of it, it is this story of connection with people, and the fact that we can carry around a lot of assumptions about people, you know, myself included. And you can feel like you're never going to have anything in common with someone, especially if they live their lives differently to you. And actually what was really interesting during the journey was getting out there and having these conversations, trying to keep an open mind. And you realise that actually you can make all kinds of interesting connections with people, and you might have more in common with them than you think, you know?
Oh, well, I think it's fabulous to see poetry brought to life in this way, and so relevant and meaningful as well. So thank you very much for coming in and talking to us about it. And we should say to, as well, everyone out there watching, Rowan's book is called The Door-to-Door Poet, and it is out now. Rowan, thank you so much.
Nice to see you.